Hey y'all, and welcome back to my channel. And if you're new here, welcome. I'm Nicole with the Bushel and Pick Designs. Today we are working on this fun alcohol ink tumbler. I'm going to make it look like a glass of beer with some textured foamy overspill on the top. So a foamy textured drip. And I am starting with a 30-ounce curved tumbler from the tumbler supply store, and I spray painted it white. A matte or flat white is best. I've tried glossy with alcohol inks, and for me it just never seems to go correctly, so I prefer just Rust-Oleum's flat white spray paint. I let that dry over the weekend, and then I'm going to start out with some golden yellowy tones of alcohol ink. This first one is a Tim Holtz ink, and it is the color Butterscotch, and I'm just going to give it one coat just all over. I'm just using a piece of a makeup sponge, and I'm just kind of patting it all over, not really caring at the moment what it looks like. I just want to build a foundation for this color. Another thing that we are going to be doing, this is yet again a fairly simple design, but just like all the things that I've been showing you this week, for the most part, is we are just building up for all that texture and dimension. So I really hope that I am not going to bore you in this one, but I am basically just going in all over this tumbler where I established that foundation for the color, and I'm just going to go back and forth and build up that color. I also picked some other yellowy orangey colors. I don't remember what colors they are. I'm so sorry, but they're in that yellowy, like golden sunflower type colors. But I started with that butterscotch, and then I'm just going to build on it, and that is what will give you the most dimension. I did not use any alcohol at first, and then after I did that first coat, then I sprayed a little bit and I just sprayed it on the cup, and then I went back in with the alcohol ink on that same exact sponge, and then I'm just going to pat it all over. And then after that round was done, I took this one is sunshine yellow, and then I took a paper towel and I put some of the alcohol ink on that, and then I am blotting that all over the tumbler as well. Just, you can see here, even without any alcohol, it's giving it a little bit different of a texture. And then after that, I'm going to go back in with the makeup sponge again and just go back and forth. I brought out 3 colors, but I mostly just used the butterscotch and the sunshine yellow, and it really just helped build on that dimension. You know, when I don't drink beer, my husband does, but usually it's just out of a can, not in a glass. But when we've gone to restaurants, I've seen how when it's in a glass, it kind of has those different textures of color, like dark and light, until it settles. So that's kind of just the look I was going for, and I just went back and forth and back and forth. I really did take my time on this. The video is sped up because it did take me, I think, maybe 15-20 minutes. I just was going back and forth and just building on that because it dries fairly quickly. So every time you go back over with the wet ink on the sponge, it kind of activates the dry ink underneath and pushes it around and moves it. So I literally just took my time back and forth and back and forth. So I hope that you don't get bored, but I will let you just watch this a little bit as it plays through, of me just kind of going back and forth. And you can see here the sponge is square, so it does leave a little bit of some square shapes. And how I avoided that is I started going, as I'm building it to these top layers, I just started going around in circles, and that really helped eliminate that squarish look. As you can see here, you can't see it in the frame, but I took my bottle of rubbing alcohol and I just gave it a very, very light spritz. I wanted to kind of represent like when the bubbles are coming from the bottom to the top. Some of the bubbles got a little bit too big, so I just took my alcohol ink on the same sponge. You can see it's really dirty at this point, and I just continued to go around and around. I kind of blended out those bigger spots, which then made a bigger, lighter spot. So I just went back in with that paper towel, and I'm going all around the paper with the paper towel now because I want to give a little bit more of that textured look all over there. It's really starting to look like fizzy beer in a cup now. You can see though how I'm just continuing to use those same two colors and just going back and forth and back and forth and building on it really created something totally different than that very first few times I put, or that very first layer that I put on this cup. You can see how building on those alcohol inks in those same two colors really brought this to life. After that, I gave it one good coat of epoxy. I did not worry about that top rim being anything colored because I'm going to add that drip, so I was not worried about that. I found this decal, actually the SVG, on Creative Fabrica, and I thought it was so perfect. It says surviving fatherhood one beer at a time. So I cut that out of black, and I'm just going to very carefully apply this because it is a curved tumbler and we know that can be tricky sometimes, but I liked that the circle wasn't a flat circle, it was kind of open, so that's why I chose this one. So when I am going to put it down, I'm going to like kind of push down in the middle of my contact paper first, and then I'm going to work my way out to one side and then work my way out to the other side. I feel for me this just helps really alleviate any bubbles by just going really slow and working my way out from the center out. So then after I applied this decal, then I am going to give it one more coat of epoxy, and then we are going to work on this strip. I am using the new facet formula from Counterculture DIY. You can see now it has a very light little lavenderish tint to it, which helps alleviate any of the yellowing over time. And I'm telling you, I love this formula. I liked their facet before, but this new formula works so well for me, and you can use it as a final coat, which is so nice compared to the old formula, and it was not recommended. I have used their turbo, but for me this one just works a little bit better. So I am going to mix that. This is how I measure my epoxy. I don't use little measuring cups. I just make sure I have equal amounts in a cup, and then I heat my part A a little bit in a bottle warmer, and then I mix them, and then I mix them up just real slowly, and I use a popsicle stick, and then just a little bit after I combine the two, I added a little bit of white alcohol ink and then a little bit of white craft paint. I'm going for that very white foamy look, and I'm just going to add a little bit at a time. You don't want to add too much paint, but enough that it's very white and opaque. And then once I was happy with the coloring, even though this is fast set, I really wanted to come to a consistency where it was nice and thick, and I wanted it to be thick enough that I could create that texture I'm going to show you, but I didn't want to have to babysit it. I wanted it to not move, but because it was fast set, you have to be very, very careful because once it starts to get warm on you, it could flash cure immediately. So I literally babysat it the whole time. I kept adding cornstarch to thicken it up, and then just continued to mix and mix, and then I would test it on the side of my little mixing cup. And then once I was really happy, I added quite a bit of cornstarch, but I just added a little at a time because we don't want to add too much. So I am just going to add enough around that rim that it was a pretty good thick looking drip. And then I'm going to tap it a little bit on the counter or the tabletop and then give it a little heat with my heat gun just to make sure that we have no air bubbles. And then once I knew for sure that it was not going to really drip any at all, because sometimes even though your drip is nice and firm, you'll add it to the cup and it will still move a little bit. So I really did not want any movement. So once I got that on there, then I really went for it. I was not sure how this was going to turn out when I was attempting this. So I was just saying a little prayer that my thought process would work out for this. So once I had that on there, I just took my same popsicle stick and I'm going back and forth and kind of swirling it around. I really wanted to give it some texture to make it look more like foam, because when you pour a glass of beer and the foam comes up over the top, it's foamy looking. It's not smooth like a regular drip. So that's the type of look I was really going for with this. So like I said, I just kind of went back and forth, kind of like when you're icing a cake and you don't want it smooth, but you give it that like textury look. That's literally exactly the same thing. I have iced a cake this same exact way before. So I just made sure that there was no stringies on the bottom. So I'm kind of curling it and swirling it and making sure that the white covers all of that white area at the top where we did not add any of that alcohol ink. I continued to just go back and forth. It was starting to get a little bit thicker, so it made it a little bit easier, but then I was just trying not to make stringies out of it and make a huge mess. Like I said earlier, was not sure if this was going to work because epoxy is self-leveling, so I didn't know if this texture would stick or if it would kind of level itself out a little bit. So we were just going on a wing and a prayer here. So after that, I set it aside and just let it dry for several hours. And then it did still have all that texture. So I was super excited when I got home and it still had all that texture. So then I gave it 2 final coats of epoxy and this beauty was all done. You can see right here, you can still see all that texture and it really, really does look like some foam coming up over out of the cup. So as usual, I hope that I have inspired you in one way or another. And if you have attempted or will attempt any of my tutorials, I would love for you to give me a tag because I would love to see what you created from my inspiration. And as usual, I will leave all of the information where to find me and all the products that I used down in the description box. And I will be back tomorrow with our final tumbler in the Dad Inspired series. So until then, I will see you and I hope you have a good night. Bye, y'all.